They removed Isabet Rowe from the Emberlung Foundry while the royal fire was still breathing in time with her lungs. No one said it that way. That would have sounded too much like truth. Forge Master Drelvik Sorn called it a necessary reassignment. The court physicians called it respiratory decline. The polished officials at the viewing rail called it image protection, because visiting envoys had come to see dragon weapons born from glory, not a woman coughing black soot into a linen cloth beside the bellows chain. The academy master waiting to replace her had trained under Drelvik's new formal rhythm system, the one he had promised would make old breathworkers unnecessary. Isabet stood on the foundry floor with both hands clasped around the iron rail to keep herself upright. The Emberlung Foundry rose around her in circles of black stone and ember glass. Great dragon ribs arched across the ceiling, not bone but old iron, shaped after the first fire beasts that had given the kingdom flame. Rivers of red heat ran beneath grated floors. Above the central furnace hung the Breathing Bellows, ancient and enormous, made of dark-scaled leather, brass lungs, and silver valves that opened and closed like something alive. The bellows did not love workers. They did not choose favorites. They answered pressure, heat, valve memory, and the rhythm of the body that had kept them from tearing themselves apart. For 12 years, Isabet had worked beneath them. For 12 years, her lungs had learned smoke, heat, ash, and rhythm. Inhale when the left valve softened. Hold when dragonfire thickened blue. Exhale when the lower furnace coughed. No one taught that in the academy. No master wrote it on a wall. It lived in the body after years of standing close enough to flame that even sleep tasted of iron. Now her body had become the reason they wanted her gone. Drelvik stood before her in his black forge coat, silver master chain resting across his broad chest. His expression held the calm sorrow of a man doing cruelty on behalf of order. "Isabet Rowe," he said, loud enough for the envoys, armor lords, and royal witnesses to hear. "Your service is honored, but the Emberlung cannot be represented by visible weakness." A few apprentices looked away. Isabet did not. She pressed the cloth in her fist until the soot stain folded inward. "My lungs were not born weak," she said. "They were forged here." The words should have landed harder. Instead, Drelvik sighed. Loyalty does not make a damaged body safe. The furnace gave a low pulse behind her. Dragon King Maeron Voss watched from the upper foundry dais, dark hair bound at the nape, gold-black armor catching furnace light along his shoulders. His eyes were the deep amber of banked dragonfire, unreadable and dangerous. Men feared his silences more than another king's rage. Isabet had once feared them too. Then, 3 winters ago, after a night firing accident cracked the eastern furnace and nearly swallowed a line of young smiths, Maeron had come down among the smoke himself. She had been kneeling by the bellows chain, coughing so hard she could not stand, counting breath under her tongue to keep the fire from surging. He had crouched beside her without witnesses. "Show me how you know when it will break," he had said. She had answered through blood-warm breath, "I don't know. I listen until it tells me." He had looked at her then as if the whole foundry had narrowed to the sound of her lungs. Now he stood above her while Drelvik made those lungs a public shame. Drelvik turned toward the dais. "Majesty, we cannot host Eastern envoys with a coughing floor, worker beside the royal bellows. The foundry must project strength." Maeron's gaze moved to Isabet. Not cold. Worse. Conflicted. "Can you complete the ceremonial run?" he asked her. Isabet's throat tightened. "I completed last night's war batch." "That was not my question." "No," she said quietly. "It was not." A silence opened. The Breathing Bellows lifted once overhead. Slowly, as if waiting, Drelvik stepped into the gap. "She has been hiding attacks of breathlessness. 3 apprentices have reported stoppages. If she collapses during a royal demonstration, the foundry's authority will suffer." Isabet looked at the apprentices. One stared at the floor. Another swallowed. The youngest, pale with guilt, whispered, "I only said you coughed after the lower vent smoked." Drelvik's head turned slightly. The boy went silent. Maeron saw it. Isabet saw him see it. "Still," he said, "the demonstration cannot fail." He had chosen the demonstration before opening the lower vent report. He had asked whether she could perform, not why the foundry had taught her lungs to break. There it was. Not hatred, not disgust. Something easier for powerful men to defend. Image. Isabet released the rail. Her knees nearly betrayed her. She made them hold. If your strength needs my sickness hidden, she said, then it is not strength you are protecting. The viewing rail stirred. One envoy lifted a jeweled spyglass, as if studying an interesting crack in a wall. Drelvik softened his voice. No one is hiding you. You will be transferred to coal sorting. Less smoke, less strain, a mercy. Isabet laughed once, and the laugh tore into a cough she hated giving them. Drelvik looked pained. The court looked embarrassed for her. Maeron took one step down from the dais. Isabet raised a hand before he could come closer. Do not carry me out, Majesty. His face changed. She had struck the memory between them, the night he had almost lifted her from the cracked furnace floor, the night she had told him that if he carried every injured worker away, no one would remain to tell him why they fell. Isabet, he said, low enough that only the front rows heard. This is not punishment. No, punishment admits it means to hurt. The bellows overhead gave a small metallic shudder. Drelvik gestured to the guards. Escort her before the Eastern delegation enters. 2 foundry guards approached. Isabet did not fight them. She walked, because being dragged would have pleased the people who needed her weakness visible. At the threshold, she turned once. Maeron stood halfway down the dais steps, caught between king and man, between memory and reputation. You know my breath, she said. You heard it save your foundry before you let them call it unfit. The word struck him. She saw it. Then the guards led her beyond the black iron doors. Behind her, Drelvik raised his voice. Begin ceremonial firing. The Academy Master took Isabet's place beneath the Breathing Bellows. He pulled the chain in perfect formal rhythm. The bellows did not answer. He pulled again. Nothing. A second master stepped in, then a third. The central furnace dimmed from white to red, from red to a dull wounded orange. Dragonfire slid backward into the coals as if refusing to be born. Beyond the doors, Isabet heard the first alarm bell. Then the second. Then, from deep inside the foundry, the Breathing Bellows exhaled one hollow note. Not a word. A rhythm. Hers. The bellows had not cleared Isabet. They had only refused a rhythm that did not know what the fire was choking on. That was the first thing Drelvik said after the alarm bells stopped shaking dust from the Emberlung rafters. A damaged instrument remembers damage, he told the royal witnesses. The Breathing Bellows have worked beside her irregular breath for 12 years. They may be echoing bad habit, not truth. The Academy Master still held the chain beneath the enormous brass valves. His perfect ceremonial count had left sweat along his temples, and nothing in the furnace but a wounded orange glow. Maeron Voss stood halfway down the dais steps, no longer above the room, and not yet beside the woman he had allowed to be escorted out. Halt the firing, he said. The envoy stirred. Drelvik turned sharply. Majesty, the Eastern delegation will see a foundry that does not lie about its own flame. The words made the room quiet. Isabet heard them from beyond the black iron doors, where the guards had stopped with uncertainty on their faces. She did not mistake the order for rescue. A king could halt a firing and still leave the woman who taught the fire to breathe outside the doors. Maeron looked toward the threshold. Bring Isabet Rowe back. Her lungs tightened before her feet moved. Drelvik lifted one hand. If she returns to the bellows chain, the inquiry is compromised. She will not return to the chain, Maeron said. The sentence cut cleaner than it should have. Isabet stepped back onto the foundry floor with the guards behind her and the whole room watching the way people watch a cracked beam overhead. Maeron's gaze moved over her face, her soot cloth, the hand pressed discreetly below her ribs. He did not reach for her. Good. If he had, she might have hated him for needing her weakness to become soft. You are granted temporary breath, witness standing, he said. Your reassignment remains pending inquiry. He had brought her back to explain the fire. He had not brought her back to belong to it. Isabet gave a small, dry laugh. It hurt, but she let him hear it. Do not call me witness, while my breath is still treated as the failure. His mouth tightened. Drelvik folded his hands over his master chain. Majesty, that is exactly the concern. Her presence has distorted the bellows' pressure memory. Formal rhythm is Academy approved because it is clean, repeatable, and not dependent on one worker's failing body. Her formal rhythm is clean, Isabet said, because it has never stood close enough to hear danger. The Academy Master flushed. Maeron turned to the recorders. Preserve the rhythm record. Formal count, valve response, furnace color, pressure drops. A brass needle arm was fixed beneath the bellows. A pressure slate was placed under witness seal. The Academy Master repeated Drelvik's formal sequence. 4 counts draw, 2 counts hold, 4 counts release. The left valve lifted. The lower furnace coughed. The Academy Master released too early. Dragonfire thickened blue, then choked back into red. The needle arm scratched a jagged line across the slate. Drelvik spoke at once. Maintenance lag, likely caused by years of compensating for her irregular timing. My lungs did not weaken the foundry, Isabet said. They learned where it was already breaking. Maeron looked at her then, and something old moved between them. The night of the cracked eastern furnace, her voice counting through smoke. His hand hovering and useless because she had told him not to carry her, while men still needed to know why the floor had split. Explain the break, he said. Isabet stayed where she stood, outside the chain circle. When the left valve softens, the lower vent should pull clean. It has not pulled clean for months. If you release on Academy count, the blue fire thickens before the smoke clears. You must hold 1 breath longer, then release low. Drelvik's eyes cooled. Improvised habit. Survival habit. Maeron said, test her count from outside the chain. Drelvik stepped forward. Majesty, she does not touch the bellows. She counts. The master pulls. Isabet looked at Maeron. You asked if I could perform. You did not ask what the foundry had done to make performance cost blood. He absorbed the words, without defense. Ask now, she said. His voice lowered. What did it do? She looked up at the ancient brass lungs overhead. It made me breathe for a vent that would not. No one moved. Then the Academy Master took the chain again. Isabet stood 10 steps away. Inhale on left softening, she said. The chain pulled. Hold. The blue thickened. Drelvik's jaw tensed. Hold. The Master's arms shook. Now release low. The bellows opened. Not fully. Enough. A thin white blade of dragonfire rose from the furnace, clean for 3 heartbeats before collapsing back into ember. The room inhaled as one. Drelvik did not. Partial response proves nothing except that her trained irregularity can coax damaged equipment. Then open the lower vent report, Isabet said. Drelvik looked at her. Maeron heard the silence. Bring it. The lower vent report is maintenance detail, Drelvik said. Not suited for envoy court. The envoys have seen the fire die, Maeron answered. They can survive paperwork. The report arrived under black soot twine. Its first pages listed ordinary ash return, then heavier smoke, then black soot in the lower vent 3 weeks ago. The youngest apprentice stepped forward before Drelvik could stop him. The vent smoked before she coughed, he said, voice shaking. I told Master Sorn. She was holding count because the lower pull came back black. Drelvik's face remained controlled. Apprentices confuse sequence under stress. Isabet looked at the boy. No. He remembered what the room wanted forgotten. Maeron turned another page. Last night's war batch record lay beneath the maintenance note. His eyes hardened as he read. Drelvik ordered the lower vent kept open despite black soot returns. Drelvik's answer came steady. To complete royal weapons under deadline, soot return does not equal danger. The physician lifted Isabet's folded cloth from the evidence tray and held it beside the vent scrap. Black dust clung to both. The alchemist touched them with ember glass. The same oily soot bloomed across each surface. The physician looked up slowly. The soot, in Isabet Rowe's cloth, matches lower vent return, not natural respiratory decline. The match did not yet prove intent. It proved the foundry had been using her lungs as a warning system, then calling the warning weakness. The match did not yet prove intent. It proved the foundry had been using her lungs as a warning system, then calling the warning weakness. Drelvik Sorn understood the difference before anyone else did. Soot source is not misconduct, he said, his voice steady beneath the dead weight of the watching envoys. The lower vent was under strain during royal war production. Every foundry breathes ash under deadline. Isabet Rowe continued working because the batch required completion, and because she knew the work. Isabet stood 10 steps from the bellows chain, temporary breath witness, and still removed from her place. Her reassignment remained pending. Her name had not been restored to the floor slate. Her lungs had been admitted as evidence, not honored as service. Maeron Voss looked at the oily soot blooming across the cloth. Open the war batch deadline orders, he said. Drelvik inclined his head. Of course, Majesty. They will show urgency, not abuse. The orders came sealed in red iron wax. A recorder broke them beneath witness. The first page listed blade quota, armor plates, envoy demonstration schedule, and delivery oaths. The second carried Drelvik's written request. No delay. Formal rhythm readiness to be demonstrated before Eastern envoys. The Academy Master shifted at the chain. Isabet read the line once. Then again. So my lungs were unfit for display, she said, but useful enough to finish the batch before your new system took credit. Drelvik's expression remained controlled. You mistake transition planning for exploitation. The formal rhythm system requires a complete ceremonial run before full adoption. Last night's production supported that transition. My body is not the danger, Isabet said. It is the record of what you made survivable. The words pressed the foundry quiet. Maeron did not look away from her this time. He had halted the firing. He had opened the orders. He had not returned her place beneath the chain. Bring the physician who signed respiratory decline, he ordered, and all injury classifications for breath workers reassigned in the last year. Drelvik's gaze sharpened. Majesty, medical privacy, was not protected when her coughing was made public. The physician arrived with a grey folder and a pale face. He bowed to Maeron first, then to Drelvik, then barely to Isabet. She noticed the order. So did Maeron. You classified Isabet Rowe's condition as natural respiratory decline, Maeron said. Yes, Majesty. Based on coughing frequency, breath weakness, black sputum, and visible exhaustion. Did you test the cloth against low event soot? The physician hesitated. No, Maester. Did you inspect the low event? No. Did you receive the low event report? The physician's throat moved. I received a maintenance summary stating no confirmed hazardous failure. Drelvik spoke smoothly. Correct. Soot return had not been classified as lethal. Temporary danger does not prove deliberate concealment. Isabet turned to the physician. You did not test my lungs against the vent. You tested my usefulness against your ceremony. The physician looked down. That was not justice. But it was the first honest direction his shame had faced. The injury records came next. 3 breath workers reassigned to coal sorting. 2 transferred to outer hammer rooms. 1 retired without pension because his coughing was marked age decline. Beside each name, the same faint notation appeared. Black residue on cloth, breath instability, visible weakness, unsuitable for royal demonstration line. Isabet's hands curled once. She knew those names. Kellen, who taught her to listen for left valve drag. Mara Thist, who could hear furnace hiss through a closed door. Old Brevin, who had held the chain longer than any master alive. All of them? She asked. The recorder swallowed. All reassigned quietly. Drelvik answered before the room could turn against him. A foundry must adjust labor to health. Coal sorting, outer hammer rooms, and retirement are safer placements. They are not punishment. Did their lungs get tested against the lower vent? Isabet asked. No one answered. He had opened the wound in the records. He had not yet named its service. Maeron turned another page. The formal rhythm proposal lay beneath the injury classifications. Its title was elegant, stamped with Drelvik's office seal. Standardization of bellows, operation, and retirement of legacy, breath dependence. The Academy Master's name appeared beneath Drelvik's. So did funding requests. So did envoy demonstration requirements. A line near the bottom read, after successful ceremonial run, old breath workers may be replaced without production loss. Isabet looked at it until the letters stopped moving. A formal system that needs sick workers hidden is not clean, she said. It is unfinished. Drelvik's eyes cooled. Formal rhythm protects the kingdom from dependence on fragile bodies. That is reform. No, she said. Reform would have asked why the bodies became fragile. Maeron's hand closed slowly over the proposal's edge. What reports did Isabet file before reassignment? The youngest apprentice stepped forward again, trembling harder now. 3, Majesty. She reported low event cough 3 times. Drelvik's voice cut gently. Informal reports. Apprentices often misunderstand verbal concerns made during production stress. Isabet looked at the boy. Did I say low event cough or my cough? The apprentice lifted his chin with visible effort. Lower vent cough. Maeron's eyes hardened. Find the first warning. The records clerk searched the maintenance packet. Pages turned. Ash fell from the twine. The foundry seemed to hold its breath without the bellows moving at all. At last, the clerk stopped. "There is an entry." "Read it," Maeron said. The clerk's voice thinned. "Lower vent returns black before release. Breathworker Rowe requests halt before Warbatch." A line had been drawn through the warning. Not by a clerk's reed, by a master chain stamp pressed in silver soot ink. Drelvik's mark. The first lower vent warning had been logged, then crossed out under Forge Master Drelvik Sorn's master chain seal. The crossed line did not prove murder. It proved knowledge. The crossed line did not prove murder. It proved knowledge. And knowledge had a chain. Drelvik Sorn looked at the master chain seal pressed over Isabet Rowe's first lower vent warning, as if it were no more troubling than a corrected tally mark. "Reviewed," he said. "Not suppressed. A master chain seal marks senior review." The warning lacked full pressure measurement, so it was summarized under maintenance irregularity until proper readings could be taken. Isabet stood beneath the dead weight of the Breathing Bellows shadow, close enough to smell the old scaled leather, far enough that everyone could see she had not been returned to the chain. Temporary breath witness. Still reassigned. Still a body under question. Maeron Voss stared at the crossed warning. "Open the review log." Drelvik inclined his head. "Of course." The review log arrived in a black iron case. Its pages were cleaner than the maintenance packet, as if danger became more elegant each time it climbed a rank. A recorder turned to the date of Isabet's first warning. Lower vent returns black before release. Breathworker Rowe requests halt before Warbatch. Then the review column, downgraded to maintenance note. No confirmed hazardous failure. Continue under observation. Maeron's jaw tightened. Who received the downgraded summary? The court physician swallowed. "I did, Majesty." "Not the original warning?" "No." Isabet looked at him. "So my lungs were judged from the softer version of what I reported." The physician's face paled. "I judged what I was given." Drelvik stepped in, before shame could become accusation. "And you judged reasonably. A foundry cannot halt war production for every informal worker impression. Maintenance requires measurement. My lungs measured it," Isabet said. "Your lungs suffered it," Drelvik corrected. "That is not the same as proving it." A blast of heat coughed from the lower furnace. Everyone turned. The central flame shuddered blue, then sank again. The Academy Master stepped back from the chain, his formal rhythm slate clutched against his chest. "The lower pull is unstable," he said. Drelvik's gaze sharpened, because the bellows have been unsettled by repeated interruption. Isabet did not move. No, because the vent still has not cleared. Maeron turned to the recorders. "Summon the reassigned breath workers." A murmur passed through the foundry. Drelvik's voice remained calm. "Majesty, many are unwell. Public hearing may distress them. Was Isabet's coughing private when you removed her before envoys?" No answer came. One by one, the workers were brought to the lower floor. Kellen came first, thin and stooped, with one hand pressed to his ribs. Marathist followed, wrapped in a grey shawl that smelled faintly of coal dust. Old Brevin leaned on two apprentices, his breath whistling softly through every step. Isabet's face changed. Not into tears, into the kind of stillness a person uses when grief has to stand upright. Kellen bowed to Maeron, then to Isabet. She was the last one who still listened below the count. Drelvik folded his hands. "Master Kellen, you were reassigned for safety. I was reassigned after I reported left valve drag." Mara's voice came next, rough but clear. "I reported black return beneath the lower grate." Brevin gave a dry laugh. "I reported the furnace coughing before I did." The words moved through the foundry like sparks finding dry straw. Drelvik did not flinch. Memory after injury is not always reliable. These workers were already declining. Isabet looked at him. "Do not call us fragile after building a system that needed our bodies to break quietly." Maeron's eyes closed once. Not long enough to become pity. Long enough to hurt. He had opened the wound in the records. He had not yet named it service. The formal rhythm funding petition was brought forward next. It bore Drelvik's seal, the Academy Master's approval, and treasury markings for expansion. Maeron opened it himself. The Academy Master stepped forward before asked, "Majesty, the formal system was tested under Academy conditions. Clean vents, measured heat, stable pressure. Was it tested with failing lower vent return?" Maeron asked. The man looked at Drelvik, then at the floor. "No, Majesty." Drelvik's voice stayed controlled. "No system should be blamed for equipment failure outside testing conditions. The purpose of reform is to reduce dependence on aging workers and inconsistent habits." "A warning summarized into silence is still a warning buried," Isabet said. Drelvik's eyes cooled. "And a kingdom that stops every time a tired worker fears smoke will never arm its borders." The envoys heard that. The armor lords heard it too. Pressure returned to the room, heavy and political. Maeron stood between the dead ceremonial run and the workers who had paid for its image. Isabet Rowe's temporary standing expands to worker injury hearings, review logs, and formal rhythm funding records, he said. Her reassignment remains pending inquiry. Isabet looked at him. "A king can open every record," she said, "and still leave the injured woman outside her place." His throat moved. "Yes," he said. No apology. No reach. Only the truth sitting between them like hot iron. Maeron turned the final page of the funding petition. A narrow paragraph had been marked for ministerial approval, written in Drelvik's precise hand. The recorder read it aloud. "Visible decline among legacy breath workers must be resolved before envoy demonstration." The petition had not used Isabet Rowe's name. That made it worse. Visible decline among legacy breath workers must be resolved before envoy demonstration. Resolved. Not treated. Not investigated. Not honored as injury. Resolved, as if damaged lungs were a spill on polished stone before royal guests arrived. The Eastern envoys stood behind their emberglass rail, silent now. Armor lords whispered over empty order contracts. The Academy Master held his formal rhythm slate, as if it had become heavier in his hands. Drelvik Sorn recovered the room with the skill of a man who had spent years teaching danger to wear order's face. "Majesty," he said. "The phrasing is unfortunate, but the meaning is administrative. Workers whose bodies can no longer meet demonstration, safety must be reassigned before public operation. That is protection." Isabet looked at Kellen, Mara, and Brevin, standing beside her with soot in their breath and history in their bent shoulders. "Protection that waits until envoys arrive is not protection," she said. "It is arrangement." Drelvik's mouth tightened by the smallest measure. "You are emotional because you are implicated." "No," Isabet said. "I am tired because I have been breathing your arrangements." Maeron Voss had not moved since the line was read. Then he took the funding petition from the recorder and laid it beside the injury classifications, the crossed-out warning, and Isabet's soot cloth. One document beside another. Not enough to convict. Enough to make the room stop pretending they were separate. "Freeze formal rhythm funding," he ordered. The Academy Master inhaled sharply. Drelvik turned. "Majesty, the system is required for border production. Without it, the kingdom remains dependent on unstable legacy practices." "No," Maeron said. "Without review, the kingdom remains dependent on injuries misnamed as reform." A sound moved through the workers. Not cheering. They were too old for that. It was only breath. But in Emberlung Foundry, breath mattered. Drelvik bowed his head. "A temporary freeze will be misunderstood by the envoys." "Then let them understand this," Maeron said. "No royal weapon demonstration proceeds while worker injury records remain under dispute." The armor lords went still. That was the cost. Contracts, prestige, border promises. The image Maeron had chosen over Isabet not an hour ago. Isabet felt it land and refused to let herself soften. A king could bleed reputation and still leave the woman he had shamed outside her place. She met his eyes across the foundry floor. He looked as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. "Good." Maeron turned to the physician. "Reclassify nothing yet. Open the original casualty rolls." Drelvik stepped forward. "Casualty rolls are not relevant to a reassignment hearing." Mara laughed. A raw little sound. "That is what they told me when I asked why my pension vanished." Brevin lifted 2 fingers. "And me when my cough became age." Kellen looked at Isabet. "And me when I stopped hearing the left valve because the left valve stopped pulling true." Maeron's eyes hardened. "Bring them." The casualty rolls arrived from the lower archive in a box, rimmed with soot. The box looked older than the formal rhythm proposal, and less loved. Its lock resisted the first key. Drelvik said softly, "Those rolls are incomplete." Isabet turned. "Incomplete before or after workers became inconvenient." He did not answer her. He looked at Maeron instead. "Majesty, Many names entered temporary illness tracking, not casualty status. It is common for active foundries. The lock opened. The recorder began to read. Kellen Rowe vent exposure, reassigned. Marathist, black return cough, outer hammer transfer. Brevin Holt, breath failure, age decline. 4 others. Then 8. Then 12. Besides several names, a smaller mark appeared. Not casualty, not reportable, suitable for quiet reassignment. Isabet's chest tightened. She had thought she knew the shape of the injury. She had known only the first room of it. "Read mine," she said. The recorder looked at Maeron. Maeron looked at Isabet. She lifted her chin. "They made my cough public. Do not make my record private for their comfort." The recorder found her name. Isabet Rowe, visible respiratory decline. Public line removal advised before envoy demonstration. Coal sorting recommended. Under that, a second notation. Retain through final war batch if breath count required. The Foundry heard it. All of it. Maeron's face changed then, not into apology, into something colder and more useful. Recognition with teeth. Drelvik spoke at once. War batch continuity required experienced support. Reassignment after completion was the safer course. Isabet stared at the notation. My lungs were too weak to be seen, but strong enough to be spent. The breathing bellows overhead gave one slow, uneven creak. No verdict. No magic answer. Only pressure shifting through old valves while human records did what they had been dragged into doing. Maeron faced Drelvik. Who wrote the retain note? Drelvik's eyes moved to the casualty roll. The notation may have been entered by a floor clerk under production instruction. Which instruction? The recorders searched the attached batch file. A small half-sheet fell from between 2 pages, its edge blackened by old ash. The Academy Master flinched when he saw the seal. Maeron picked it up without breaking witness order, holding it flat for the recorder to read. Ventilation adjustment for demonstration readiness, the recorder said. Drelvik's face remained still, too still. Maeron's voice lowered. Read the order. The recorder swallowed. Reduce lower vent draw during final war batch to maintain visible flame height for envoy line. Isabet's damaged lungs tightened around one terrible understanding. The vent had not merely failed. Someone had told it to breathe less. The order did not say Drelvik Sorn wanted anyone's lungs ruined. It said the Foundry had been told to breathe less so the flame would look taller. That was a cleaner kind of cruelty. Reduce lower vent draw during final war batch to maintain visible flame height for envoy line. Isabet Rowe stared at the sentence until the words blurred at the edges. Around her, Emberlung Foundry seemed to press closer. Hot stone, old soot, brass valves, dragonfire sitting low in the furnace like a beast held by the throat. Drelvik spoke before the silence hardened against him. Ventilation adjustment is standard during ceremonial preparation. A lower draw can improve flame presentation for brief intervals. It is not sabotage. For brief intervals, Isabet said. His eyes moved to her. She held his gaze. How long was my final war batch? The recorder turned pages with shaking fingers. 9 hours. Marathist made a broken sound. Brevin closed his eyes. Maeron Voss stood very still. Open the vent adjustment ledger, he said. Drelvik's jaw tightened. Majesty, those are technical settings. Misread by non-masters. They can create panic. The Foundry's already choking, Maeron answered. Let it panic accurately. The vent ledger came from beneath the lower dais, where heat had warped the leather corners. It listed damper angles, lower draw ratios, furnace height, and worker assignments. The first reduction had been small, then larger, then repeated, always before observation periods. Always when envoys, armor lords, or royal contractors were scheduled near the viewing rail, and always with legacy breathworkers assigned beneath the bellows. Kellen, Mara, Brevan, Isabet. The physician read the pattern, then looked away. Isabet did not. My lungs were not evidence of decline, she said. They were evidence of delay. Drelvik's voice cooled. Older workers were assigned because they had experience managing unstable fire. That is not harm. That is confidence. No, Mara rasped. Confidence would have let us know what we were breathing. The Academy Master stepped forward, pale but steady. Master Sorn, the formal rhythm system was never designed for reduced lower draw. Academy trials assumed full vent clearance. Drelvik turned on him with quiet precision. Academy trials assume maintained equipment. If old vents required experienced workers, that proves why standardization is necessary. Isabet laughed once, and the laugh scraped through her chest. You built a system that failed when the foundry was honest. The breathing bellows gave a low metallic tremor overhead. No judgment, only pressure shifting through lungs older than everyone in the room. Maeron turned the ledger to a column marked transition readiness. What does this mean? The recorder read. Legacy breath dependence to be reduced after demonstration. Workers showing visible strain to be reassigned before formal adoption. Drelvik said, that is humane transition language. Isabet looked at the injury records. Humane would have stopped the vent. You stopped the witnesses. The words struck the floor hard. Maeron's hand moved once, as if toward her. He stopped it. Good. She did not need his hand on her shoulder while the room still held her name under reassignment. Instead, he turned to the lower foundry guards. Seal the vent controls. No master touches them alone. Bring a crown engineer, a physician, a breath worker witness, and the academy master. Drelvik bowed. As you command. But there was anger, now beneath the obedience. The lower vent controls were opened under witness. Heat rolled out, thick and bitter. A black iron damper sat half-closed where it should have drawn smoke from the furnace throat. Beside it, a secondary chain had been locked in place with a master clasp. The engineer crouched, wiped soot from the hinge, and held up his cloth. Black oil streaked it. Restricted draw, he said. Not accidental. Set position. Drelvik answered immediately. Set for flame stability. For whom? Isabet asked. He looked at her. She spoke before he could choose the safer lie. For the fire, or for the men watching it? No one answered. The engineer tested the damper range. When he opened the drawer fully, the central furnace shuddered, spat black smoke, then cleared into a low white flame. Not tall, not glorious, breathable. The Academy Master's face crumpled with professional horror. Formal count would work better with full draw. Not better, Isabet said. Honestly. Maeron looked at her then, and the distance between them burned worse than the furnace. You kept the fire alive through this, he said. I kept people alive through this, she answered. The fire was only louder. His face changed. Not soft. Struck. Drelvik lifted his chin. Majesty, I object to emotional reframing. Foundry production required visual proof of strength. Border contracts depend on confidence. A crown cannot show weak flame. Isabet stepped closer to the evidence table. If your strength needs lungs hidden, vents narrowed, records softened, and old workers removed before guests arrive, then your strength is theater. The envoys heard her. So did the armor lords. So did Maeron. He turned to the recorder, read every adjustment tied to worker reassignment. The list grew. Lower draw reduced. Kellen removed. Lower draw reduced. Mara transferred. Lower draw reduced. Brevin retired. Lower draw reduced. Isabet retained through war batch, then removed before envoy demonstration. The foundry did not gasp. It had been gasping for years. The final page of the ledger stuck to the back cover with heat-softened wax. The engineer loosened it carefully. A private memorandum appeared beneath. Drelvik's seal sat at the bottom. The recorder's voice thinned. To ensure smooth adoption of formal rhythm governance, legacy breathworkers exhibiting decline should be cycled through high-visibility strain points before removal, so court confidence favors replacement. Isabet felt the room tilt around her. Drelvik had not confessed. He had not needed to. The system had written down what it wanted her body to become. Evidence. By the time the private memorandum was sealed, the Emberlung Foundry had stopped sounding like a place of power. It sounded like a body trying not to cough. The central furnace pulsed low and uneven. The breathing bellows hung above it, with their brass valves half open. Not dead, not alive, only waiting for a rhythm the room no longer had the right to demand. Drelvik Sorn looked at the memorandum under witness glass. To cycle workers through high-visibility strain points, he said, means observed transition testing. It does not mean injury. The language is administrative. Isabet Rowe laughed once. The sound hurt her, but she did not hide it. You keep calling pain administrative because paper does not cough back. The workers behind her shifted. Kellen lowered his head. Mara Thist pressed a cloth to her mouth, Old Brevin stood very still, as if every breath had to be negotiated before it entered him. Maeron Voss looked at them all, then at the funding petition, then at Isabet, still not restored, still outside the bellows chain, still named temporary, while her body gave the room its proof. Formal rhythm adoption is suspended, he said. Drelvik turned. Majesty, without a certified rhythm system, royal production cannot meet border obligation. Then production slows. The armor lords stirred hard. One envoy whispered behind the ember glass rail. Drelvik's voice stayed calm, but pressure lived beneath it now. A slowed foundry weakens the crown. One worker's injury cannot govern military readiness. Isabet looked at him. It was not one worker. That remains under inquiry. No, Mara rasped. It remains under our ribs. The words hit the foundry harder than any bell. Maeron ordered the recorders forward. All legacy breath workers named in the injury rolls receive medical custody and wage protection pending inquiry. Isabet felt something move in her chest. Not forgiveness, never that quickly, but recognition that an order could finally travel in the right direction. Drelvik bowed with visible restraint, a generous precaution. Not generous, Isabet said. Late. Maeron's eyes found hers. He did not defend himself. Good. The furnace coughed again. A thin blue flare climbed the central chamber and twisted wrong, licking at the vent cage instead of rising straight. The Academy Master reached instinctively for the chain. Isabet's body knew the danger, before thought did. Her breath caught in the old count. Inhale. Hold. No. She closed her mouth. The blue flare bent lower. A young apprentice cried out, "It's choking." Drelvik snapped. Formal count. Now. The Academy Master pulled. 4 counts draw. 2 counts hold. 4 counts release. The flare thickened, turned bruised blue, and slammed back into the coals. Heat rolled across the floor. Apprentices stumbled away from the grate. Maeron stepped toward the furnace. Clear the lower draw. The engineer shouted from below. Damper open, Majesty. Valve memory is dragging. Drelvik seized on it. Exactly. Years of irregular breath have trained the bellows against formal operation. Isabet turned to him slowly. If the foundry wants my breath, she said, ask what yours refused to hear. The words silenced the master chain. Maeron looked at her. Can you steady it from here? Every eye turned to her. There it was. The old hunger. The foundry needed her. The crown needed her. The men who had called her unfit now needed the damaged lungs they had displayed as shame. Isabet stepped back. No. Maeron went still. Not angry. Struck. Drelvik's eyes sharpened. Refusal during active fire risk may be judged as endangering crown property. Isabet faced the court, pale with heat, chin lifted despite the pressure inside her ribs. Crown property did not cough black soot into linen for 12 years. Workers did. A silence opened behind her. She untied the breath counter cord from her wrist, the cord she had used in secret to mark holds and releases during unstable runs, and placed it on the evidence table. I will not breathe the foundry alive while my name is still pending reassignment, while Kellen is called decline, while Mara is called unsuitable, while Brevin is called age, and while the law still lets a master hide injury under image. Drelvik spoke softly. So the truth emerges. You want authority. Isabet looked at him without flinching. No, I want no worker to become necessary only after being ruined. Maeron's hand closed at his side. What do you require? He asked. She gave him the answer without tenderness. Not comfort. Not rescue. Not your hand under my elbow. Written safety law. Open vent custody. Worker witness standing. Injury classification as service harm, not personal failure. And no weapon batch, until the lower system can breathe without borrowing lungs. The armor lords erupted. Impossible. Border contracts cannot wait. Dragonsteel quotas. Maeron's voice cut through them. Enough. The foundry stilled. Isabet watched him. This was the place where he could choose image again. He looked at the furnace, at the envoys, at the workers, at her cord lying small and terrible on the evidence table. No one compels Isabet Rowe's breath, he said. The sentence protected her. It did not yet restore her. She turned toward the black iron doors. Maeron took one step, stopped himself. Isabet. She did not turn fully. A king can refuse to force me, she said, and still leave me with every reason to walk away. Then she walked. This time, No guard escorted her. This time, the foundry watched the woman it had spent 12 years using leave by choice. Behind her, the central furnace gave one last blue shudder. The breathing bellows opened and closed without sound, and the royal fire went out. Morning found the Emberlung Foundry dark. Not dead. Worse. Waiting. No dragonfire moved beneath the grated floor. No white flame ran along the central furnace throat. The breathing bellows hung above the chain with their brass lungs folded inward, as if the whole foundry had decided not to breathe until the people inside it learned what breath had cost. Armor lords arrived before breakfast. Envoys came wrapped in cold velvet. Border captains demanded steel. Drelvik's son stood before them all, with his master chain restored across his chest and grief arranged carefully on his face. "Majesty," he said, "the foundry cannot remain silent, because one worker has withdrawn cooperation during inquiry. The border contracts are not emotional matters." Maeron Voss had not slept. It showed only in the colder edge of his eyes. "No weapon batch begins," he said, "until vent custody, injury classification, and worker witness standing are written under Crown order." The armor lords erupted. Drelvik waited until their anger made his reason seem calm. "A draft law written in panic will endanger production for generations." "Production has been fed with lungs for years," Maeron said. "Perhaps it should learn fear." The court quieted. Isabet was not there. That mattered. Maeron did not speak these words to soften her. He spoke them while she was absent, when they could not be mistaken for a performance offered at her feet. He ordered the lower archive opened under witness. Wage records came first. Medical notes followed, then reassignment files. Kellen, Mara, Brevin, and the others were brought not as failing workers but as injury witnesses, seated before physicians who no longer had permission to bow to masters before patients. The court physician read the new provisional language with a shaking voice. "Black soot exposure linked to low event return shall be classified as service harm pending final review." Marathist closed her eyes. Old Brevin put one hand over his mouth. Kellen whispered, "Service." One word. It nearly broke the room. Drelvik spoke softly. "Pending final review. That distinction must remain." "It remains," Maeron said. "So does wage protection." The treasurer opened a chest. Coins were counted for reassigned breath workers and families of those marked unfit without pension. Not enough. Never enough. But coin on the table meant the Crown could no longer pretend their injuries were private failures. At the lower salt infirmary, Isabet heard about the order from an apprentice who came running with ash on his sleeves. "He named it service harm," the boy said, "not decline." Isabet sat on a stone bench, wrapped in a grey shawl, breath shallow but steady. Her chest hurt from yesterday's refusal more than from coughing. Choosing not to save the foundry had taken strength no one would ever record correctly. "Pending final review?" she asked. The boy blinked. "Yes." "Then he has opened the word. He has not finished it." The boy looked disappointed. Isabet softened only for him. "Do not rush toward gratitude. It makes hungry men easy to feed with crumbs." By noon, Maeron came to the infirmary threshold. "Alone." He stopped outside. Isabet looked up. "You found the door. I was told not to carry you. I was not speaking only of my body. I know." He placed a sealed parchment on the stone between them, but did not cross the threshold. "Draft safety order. Vent custody. Worker witness standing. Injury classification. No image-based removal during public demonstration. No reassignment without independent medical review." She did not touch it. "Why bring it to me?" "Because the law was written over your lungs. It should not be rewritten over them too." Her breath caught once. She hated that the answer was good. He saw the catch and looked away, giving her the dignity of not being watched while pain moved through her. "You still have not returned my place," she said. "No. Good. Do not hand me a chain before you make it safe." His jaw tightened. "I will not." She studied him. "And if I never stand under the bellows again?" "Then the law still stands." That was the first thing he had said that did not ask her breath to prove his regret. Before she could answer, an alarm bell rang from the foundry. Not the deep bell of fire failure, the sharper bell of authority invoked. Maeron turned. An apprentice stumbled into the infirmary passage. "Majesty Forge, Master Sorn, has opened the emergency production statute." Maeron's face went still. "On whose authority?" "The old Master Charter," the boy said, shaking. He says Crown defense permits requisition of essential breath labor when dragonfire failure threatens border supply. Isabet rose too fast and had to grip the bench. Maeron's hand moved. Stopped. She saw it. Do not, she said. He closed his hand into a fist at his side. The apprentice swallowed. The order names, Mistress Rowe. The corridor seemed to narrow around her damaged lungs. Maeron's voice turned lethal. Read the wording. The boy unfolded the paper. Isabet Rowe. Temporary breath. Witness. Identified as essential respiratory asset for restoration of royal fire under emergency necessity. Isabet stared at the words. Not worker. Not woman. Asset. Drelvik had found the law's oldest cruelty and polished it into need. Maeron reached for the parchment at his belt, the safety order not yet sealed. Isabet's voice stopped him. No. He turned. She stood upright now, grey-faced but unbowed. If your new law cannot stop the old one before I breathe for you, she said, then it is not law yet. Outside, the Emberlung's dead chimneys released a single thread of black smoke. It curled against the wind. Then it bent toward Drelvik's sealed office. By the time Isabet Rowe reached the Emberlung Foundry again, her name had changed on paper. Not restored. Reduced. Essential respiratory asset. The old emergency statute lay on the public evidence board, written in the grand language of war and necessity. It allowed a forge master to requisition specialized labor when royal fire failure threatened border defense. Drelvik Sorn stood beside it, with the calm of a man hiding cruelty inside legal history. No one questions Mistress Rowe's value, he said. The statute acknowledges it. Her breath has technical importance. Therefore, under emergency necessity, she may be compelled to assist until the royal fire is restored. Isabet looked at the word asset, then at the chain beneath the breathing bellows. Her lungs tightened as if the foundry itself had reached for them. Maeron Voss entered behind her, with the unsealed safety order in his hand. Drelvik turned at once. Majesty, refusing emergency requisition may delay border weapons. The old charter is still active. Then it should have died sooner, Maeron said. The armor lord stirred. Isabet lifted one hand. Maeron stopped speaking. That mattered. She faced the evidence board. Not him. You called me unfit when my breath embarrassed you. You call me essential when the fire embarrasses you. Drelvik's expression stayed mild. Necessity changes classification. No, she said. Necessity reveals appetite. A few workers lowered their eyes to hide their reaction. The breathing bellows hung silent overhead. The black smoke thread from the dead chimneys still leaned wrong, curling along the upper draft corridor toward Drelvik's sealed office. Isabet saw it again. Not magic. Airflow. The foundry was telling them where smoke wanted to go, when men stopped forcing it down workers' throats. Drelvik followed her gaze. Residual draft. The foundry is unsettled. Then we test draft, Isabet said. Not my lungs. Maeron looked at her. Name the test. She did not soften at the way he asked. Cold smoke path. No fire. No chain. Seal the lower vent, open the office corridor, and let neutral smoke show where the blocked return has been traveling. Drelvik's eyes cooled. My office contains master records. Then records can learn to breathe in public. Maeron turned to the engineer. Prepare cold smoke under witness. Drelvik stepped forward. Majesty, the emergency statute requires restoration of fire, not theatrical inspection. Isabet faced him fully. If the foundry needs my breath, ask what yours refused to hear. The fire can wait until the law learns the difference between a worker and an asset. Maeron looked at the old statute, then at Isabet. He placed his draft safety order beside it. Read the first clause, he ordered the recorder. The recorder swallowed. No foundry worker, breath worker, hammer hand, vent tender, coal carrier, or apprentice may be compelled into hazardous operation while injury classification, ventilation safety, or master concealment remains under inquiry. Drelvik's voice sharpened. Unsealed draft. No force. Then seal it, Isabet said. The court went still. Maeron's eyes held hers. This is your condition? No, she said. This is the floor. My conditions come after. Something like pain moved through his face. Good. Let him feel the height of what he had not built. Maeron took the crown seal from his belt. Drelvik spoke quickly. Majesty, sealing emergency law in the middle of production failure weakens the throne. No, Maeron said. Calling injured workers' assets did that. He pressed the seal into hot black wax. The new safety order took law before the dead furnace, and every witness watching. Isabet breathed once. It hurt. It was hers. Now, she said, the test. Cold smoke was made from pale ash and winter oil, harmless, clean, visible. The engineer released it beneath the lower vent while the bellows remained untouched. Smoke should have risen into the main chimney. It did not. It slid sideways. It climbed the hidden draft seam above the review shelf, curled past the formal rhythm proposal cabinet, and pressed toward Drelvik's office door. A murmur ran through the workers. Drelvik's jaw tightened. Air seeks old cracks. That proves poor masonry. Isabet watched the smoke gather under the office threshold, thick and darkening. Poor masonry does not wear a master lock. Maeron turned to the guards. Open it. Drelvik stepped between them. Those are private master chambers. Isabet's voice was quiet. So were our lungs, until you made them public. The guards opened the door, under witness. Smoke poured in. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the far wall of Drelvik's office darkened in narrow vertical lines. A hidden vent grate appeared behind a tapestry of the first dragon furnace. Beneath it, ash had gathered for years, along the edge of a locked iron cabinet. The engineer crouched. Return smoke has been entering here. Maeron's eyes cut to Drelvik. Why would lower vent return feed your office? Drelvik's voice remained controlled. Old monitoring channel. Masters must observe draft quality. Isabet looked at the ash-black cabinet, then opened the monitor. Drelvik did not move. For the first time, silence did not protect him. Maeron ordered, open it. The iron cabinet resisted 2 keys before the engineer broke the ash-clogged hinge. Inside were ledgers wrapped in smoke-stained cloth. Not production records. Not rhythm proposals. Names, dates, breath counts, reassignments, death marks. The first page bore a title written in Drelvik's own formal hand. Legacy, Breathworker, Casualty, and Removal Index. The casualty index did not scream. It breathed dust. Page after page lay inside Drelvik Sorn's locked cabinet, smoke-stained and carefully numbered. Names of breathworkers, dates of reassignment, cough marks, soot depth, vent reports, pension denials, removal recommendations. Not one page called itself cruelty. That was how it had survived. Drelvik stood before the open cabinet with ash at his cuffs and his master chain still bright against his chest. A casualty index is not concealment, he said. It is internal tracking. Masters must monitor labor decline. Isabet Rowe looked at the first page, then the second, then the names she knew. Kedlen, Mara, Brevin. 6 more. 9 more. 2 marked dead after quiet retirement. Her lungs tightened until breath became a narrow door. My body was not the danger, she said. It was the record of what you made survivable, and when the record grew inconvenient, you locked the rest in a cabinet. Drelvik's expression hardened. You are making grief into law. No, she said. I am making law. Stop hiding grief. Maeron Voss turned to the recorder. Read the removal column. The recorder's voice shook. Visible decline. Public line risk. Unsuitable before envoy inspection. Retain until batch completion. Reassign before demonstration. The foundry heard every phrase. The envoys heard it. The armor lords who had demanded steel heard it. The old emergency statute calling Isabet an asset sat beside Maeron's newly sealed safety order, and the difference between them looked suddenly brutal. Drelvik spoke again, quieter now. I protected production. Border weapons keep villages alive. A foundry cannot place every injured worker above the realm. Marathis stepped forward, shawl trembling around her thin shoulders. We were the realm. Old Brevin lifted his head. Our breath was in every blade. Kellen looked at the dead furnace, and every blade forgot us. That broke something no law had named yet. Maeron removed the master chain from Drelvik's chest himself, not with violence, with ceremony. That made it worse. Forge, Master Drelvik Sorn, he said. You are stripped of foundry authority pending tribunal for concealed injury records, downgraded danger reports, unsafe vent restriction, unlawful emergency requisition, and misuse of worker bodies to protect formal rhythm funding. Drelvik's face drained of color. only when the chain left him, not when names were read. When authority was removed, Isabet noticed. So did Maeron. Guards took Drelvik back from the bellows line. He did not shout. Men like him trusted systems too long to understand the moment a system stopped trusting them. Maeron turned to the foundry floor. Then, in front of envoys, armor lords, workers, physicians, and the woman he had failed, he read the old removal notice aloud. Isabet Rowe, respiratory decline. Visible weakness, unsuitable for royal demonstration. His voice held steady. His eyes did not. I allowed this, he said. I chose envoy image over the woman who kept the Emberlung breathing. I asked whether she could perform before I asked what performance had cost her. I let her damaged lungs be treated as failure when they were service injury. No one moved. Isabet did not forgive him. But the words reached a place public shame had carved open. Maeron set the notice on the evidence table and wrote beneath it in black seal ink. Isabet Rowe, breathworker, injured in Crown service. Foundation witness of lower vent failure. He looked to the physician. Reclassify every matching worker record. Service harm, wage restoration, medical care, pension repair for families. The treasurer bowed. This time, workers watched the coin chests open before any weapon order was discussed. Isabet stepped toward the breathing bellows. The foundry went still. Maeron did not follow until she looked back. You may stand outside the chain, she said. Not beside me yet. His throat moved. Yes. She faced the workers. No blade leaves Emberlung until the new law is read. The armor lords began to protest. Maeron silenced them with one look. The recorder read the law, under the dead bellows. No worker could be removed for visible injury without independent review. No breathworker report could be downgraded without original wording attached. No formal rhythm system could replace lived breath practice until tested with failing vent conditions and worker witnesses present. No emergency statute could name a worker an asset. Breathworkers held authority to halt fire when vent return turned black. The Academy Master signed first. Kellen signed with shaking fingers. Mara signed. Brevin signed. Then Isabet. Only after her name dried did she lift the breath counter cord from the evidence table. The breathing bellows opened once overhead. Not commanding. Waiting. Isabet looked at Maeron. If I breathe for this foundry now, it is not for your envoys. I know. It is not because you need weapons. I know. It is because the workers behind me will have the right to stop before their lungs become proof. Maeron's voice lowered. Yes. Isabet took her place beneath the chain. Not the old place. A new one, marked by witness. She did not pull. The Academy Master did, under her count. Inhale on left, softening. The bellows lifted. Hold. The furnace glowed blue. Hold until the vent clears. The lower drawer opened clean for the first time in months. Release low. White dragonfire rose. Not tall, not theatrical, breathable. The flame spread through the furnace throat in a steady living line, and the bellows answered the rhythm not because Isabet was chosen, but because the foundry had finally stopped forcing her body to lie for it. No one cheered. They listened. For once, that was enough. Later, when the envoys had signed delayed contracts under the new safety law, and the workers had gone to the infirmary with pay marks in hand, Maeron found Isabet outside the lower doors. He stopped several steps away. You told me not to carry you, he said. I remember. I will carry the law instead. She looked at him then, tired and unsoftened, with soot at her collar and the breath counter cord wrapped around her wrist. And if I never ask for more, then the law still holds. The answer entered her slowly, not as forgiveness, as space. She looked back at the Emberlung Foundry, where white fire breathed evenly under worker witness. You may walk beside me to the infirmary, she said. Not ahead, not behind. Something fierce and quiet moved through his face. Beside, he said. Isabet began walking. Maeron matched her pace. For the first time, no one asked her damaged lungs to prove their worth. The foundry breathed behind her, and Isabet Rowe chose where her next breath would go.